everyone, my name is Nick Besso. I'm a dietitian at Sooma, a multidisciplinary practice that specializes in treating eating disorders and sports nutrition in both Montreal and the United States. Today I figured that we could talk about the concept of weight restoration using a metaphor that describes what happens in the body when we are restricting our intake, whether we have an eating disorder, disordered eating, or we're a chronic dieter, and then what happens when we then try to renourish our bodies. So I will use the analogy that all of our bodies are like a factory. So in this factory, let's say we build pens. So in the factory, we have different workers, so different lines where people build different parts of the pens. And this is actually representative of the different parts of our bodies. So the brain, the digestive system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, the reproductive system. And so you have all of these different assembly lines that are working together based on the supply that's coming in and the demand of how many pens are needed in the environment every day. So typically when a body is well nourished and it's at a natural body weight where it feels comfortable, the factory functions very well. So you have a supply that comes in, the supply can vary, but that's okay because the factory has stores in case you're missing a part to build the pen, and then you meet the demand daily. So let's say when restriction begins, and again, this doesn't have to be significant restriction. It can be significant, it can feel insignificant, it could feel like, oh, well, I worked with somebody who just told me to reduce my caloric intake. Whatever impacts your supply and reduces it is considered restriction by your body and the factory. So let's say there's a reduction in supply. Usually the manager of the factory will typically not necessarily respond. This might be just a small blip in the supply chain. It might be nothing, and that's okay. We have stores, right? So all the workers kind of continue working as normal. The productivity continues, and all the assembly lines are working at full capacity, continuing to meet demand. So what happens over time actually is that each assembly line is kind of going into the storage units and taking small pieces so that they can continue to meet the demand in the environment. But eventually the manager notices that actually the supply isn't coming back up, it's staying low. So something needs to happen because we're actually not able to meet the demand of the environment if we continue with this supply. So what happens is the manager actually lays off some workers. And this is representative of different parts of the body just starting to function less effectively. So what you could be experiencing if you are restricting your intake is maybe decreased cognitive functioning, decreased concentration, your digestive system might slow down. If you menstruate, you might actually have changes in your menstrual cycle or maybe lose your period. You might actually feel more weakness. If you're an athlete, maybe you're not recovering the same way from workouts. Maybe your sleep is impacted. So all of these different systems that are impacted are the different assembly lines that are less efficient. And that's because the manager has started to lay off workers. And then the manager is notifying the environment to say, sorry, we no longer can meet the previous demand. So we're actually going to reduce what we offer to you. So that is the energy output. And this is all representative of what you might hear in reading things as decreased metabolic rate. So basically your factory continues to function, but it's just maintaining the assembly lines and the production that is absolutely necessary to stay alive. So then let's say you want to seek help and you want to change this relationship that you have with food. You might hopefully work with a registered dietitian who will suggest that you increase your energy intake. So you start kind of reapproaching food, you slowly start reintroducing foods, and you might feel really uncomfortable because your body changes and you might not actually feel better while your body is changing. And I think this is really hard for a lot of people because they tell themselves, well, I'm eating more, my body's changing, but I actually don't feel like my concentration is better. I don't necessarily feel stronger. But what's happening actually is that the supply in the environment might be increasing, and the manager recognizes that. But before he starts opening up the assembly lines at full capacity, what's going to happen is that they're going to increase the stores first and make sure that there's a backup in the factory in case there's a drop in supply that ever happens again. So we increase the supply. The manager maintains productivity in the factory at 50%, 40%, 70%, whatever has been deemed appropriate to meet the demand now that it's been reduced. And initially, whatever is increased in the supply, the oversupply, will be put in storage to make up for another situation where there might be a risk of famine. And once the manager perhaps feels safe in the supply staying fairly steady, kind of going back to previous times, previous capacity, well, then perhaps the manager will start rehiring workers again. So once the workers kind of get rehired, certain assembly lines will be prioritized to meet the demand. And once the assembly lines are functioning in full capacity, well, then we will notify the environment and say, okay, we can actually meet an increased demand. We are confident in our supply. Our factory is working at full capacity. And now if you do want to buy more pens from us, we're able to actually meet that demand. And what is so uncomfortable about this process is that recovering from disordered eating, an eating disorder, or even moving away from chronic dieting is not something that happens overnight. I think it's a process, and it feels so extremely uncomfortable. And it's so hard to trust that eventually your factory will actually be functioning at full capacity. Your body will trust you again, and you will be able to reap the benefits of nourishing yourself. So this analogy is meant to hopefully give you a bit of comfort, give you a bit of hope in your recovery wherever you are in it, and to trust that your body is actually just trying to show up for you and adapt to whatever input we're giving it. And really, it's not trying to punish you. Thanks again for joining us today. If you enjoyed watching this video, please like and subscribe. We look forward to seeing you again shortly.